first way, argument from motion. Okay. Now, like I said, I borrowed this PowerPoint. I think I borrowed a lot of the elements from Rob Coons down at University of Texas. But I don't know. I went back and looked at his PowerPoint just now, and I'm not sure if I borrowed this part. So I'm not sure where I got this. I might have gotten this from Alex Proust, perhaps. But anyway, so this is the first way, argument from motion. Okay. So you can see the premises, the conclusion, and so on. Now, let's just start with the premise. Premise 1. Our senses prove that some things are in motion. Okay. In other words, I look out into the world, and this is what I see. I see that things are moving, like very unobjectionable. So far, so good. Okay. Now, by the time we get to the conclusion, this is how logical arguments work. If I disagree with a conclusion, like he's of course going to say, well, everybody thinks this is God. We have a first mover, so on and so on, right? So we're going to arrive at God's existence here at the end. If I don't like that, for example, if I'm an atheist, I cannot just naysay the conclusion. I can disagree with the conclusion, but I can't just disagree with it. I have to, if I disagree with the conclusion, go back up here in the premises and find something that went wrong with the argument, because of course the argument is valid. We're assuming the argument is valid, but if all of these premises are true as well, then the conclusion follows from that. So as you're going through this argument, keep that in mind. Think, okay, what is it that seems sketchy or wrong about this? Which one of these premises would I reject? And just do that as an exercise. Even if you're a believer, you're a theist, a Christian, Catholic, whatever it may be, just try to do this. Try to find something in the argument that is fishy or sketchy or whatever. Okay. But premise 1 here, I don't think would be one of them. Premise 1, our senses prove. I look out into the world, I see that some things are in motion. Like I said, very unobjectionable. Like there's nothing to object there, right? Okay. What about premise 2? Things move when potential motion becomes actual motion. What does that mean? This requires some definitional work. Okay. So actual motion, that just means that things are moving currently. Potential motion obviously means that it's not currently actively moving. Potential motion means something like at rest. Okay. So this literally means things move when things at rest go into motion. Okay. So if I'm teaching on this, I'd be like, all right, anybody object to that? And nobody does, right? Because that's, again, just, so far so good. Like this is just a definitional sort of thing, right? Things move when potential motion becomes, things move when things at rest go into motion. That's just definitional. That's what it means to move. Okay. You might quibble with some terminology, but given that we understand how language works, so I can't object to that. Okay. So far so good. Premise 1 and 2 are pretty unassailable. There's nothing to argue with. What about premise 3? Only an actual motion can convert a potential motion into an actual motion. What about that? Well, this means, again, only something that is moving can make something at rest move. That seems true too. In fact, that seems one of like Newton's laws of motion, right? Which is pretty crazy when you think about it, because Aquinas is writing this in the 1200s, right? And we like to think that Newton came up with these like laws of thermodynamics, laws of motion, and so on. But here he is in the 1200s. He's formulating this as one of the premises in his argument. And in fact, these 5 ways, I didn't mention this, but these 5 ways, they don't come from Aquinas. They actually come from Aristotle. These 5 ways in the form that they are, all five, which is, I think, significant because, again, pagan philosophers, Plato, Aristotle, and so on, they had these arguments. They weren't known as being very spiritual or religious authors, but they did have arguments for God's existence. They did believe in deity. So only something in motion can make something at rest go into motion. Again, I don't know any way to object to that, so I'm just going to keep going. Let's see, premise 4. Nothing can be at once in both actuality and potentiality in the same respect. In other words, nothing can be both moving and at rest. Okay, maybe, right? So here's an interesting thing. So like, perhaps this is the first spot that I can find wiggle room. If you were going to object, this would be here, right? Because like, let's think about like, I'm moving, but I'm at rest right now. I'm sitting, and I'm also hurtling around the sun and spinning on Earth's orbit, right? On its axis. That's movement. So I'm both moving and at rest. So doesn't that seem to contradict what he's saying here? Or what if I'm asleep, right? I'm both at rest, and then also my body, my neural activity and so on, and my heart and my lungs, right? That's motion, that's movement, and yet I'm at rest. So boom, contradiction. There you have it. Proves premise 4 wrong, right? No, not right. Because this part that I don't have highlighted, these small words like in the same respect and at once, these are really important. So this means it can't happen at the same time. This one means that they have to happen in the same sense. Okay, so I have to be both in motion and at rest in the same respect. And that's not what's happening in the examples I described. Right, when I'm asleep, I'm not both at rest and moving with respect to I'm not both awake and asleep at the same time. Or my body is not both neural activity and at rest in no neural activity. No, that would not work. That'd be contradictory. Or I'm at rest in my seat, but I'm also not at rest in my seat. No, I'm both moving around the sun and not moving around the sun. No, right? So that's what he's saying. Like, I can't both be moving and at rest in the same respect. All the examples I've given have been in different respects. I'm sitting in my seat and I'm hurtling around the sun. Those are moving and at rest in different respects. I'm not both sitting in my seat and not sitting in my seat. I'm not both hurtling around the sun and not hurtling around the sun. That would be a contradiction. And of course, this small phrase at once, you can't, you could be moving and at rest at different times, sure, but we're talking about the same time, of course. That's part of what we assume. So as long as we understand what premise 4 is saying, it's really hard to object to this. So what about this next premise? Therefore, nothing can move itself. Now, we have actually reached, like, we see conclusion right here and a therefore right here. And based on what I said about conclusions, right, if you naysay conclusion, you got to go up here and find something. Well, this is actually, I should probably relabel this instead of just premise 5. It should be like conclusion 1. We've actually got another, this could be conclusion 2. This could be conclusion 3, ultimate conclusion. So there's no new information here in this conclusion 1 here, or premise 5. This is just a summary of what has already been said. It's an inference based on what we've already established. So again, nothing can move itself. If you think this is wrong, there's something up here that you've got to reject. It does seem wrong though, right? Because I can move myself. Well, you have to understand what he means by this. Nothing can move itself. In other words, nothing can make itself begin to move itself. Nothing can make itself begin to move if it wasn't already moving. I can like go to sleep and then I can wake up. That seems like beginning to move myself like every new day. However, it's not what he's talking about at the beginning of movement at all. Like I would have to, if there is no movement in a thing at all, that would mean it would be dead. Like if there's absolutely no movement, that would mean I'm dead. But there's constant movement, right? There's constant movement. And so it's not the case that I'm ever completely at rest. Something that's completely at rest would be dead. Now, I am not moving myself in the sense of making myself begin to move itself. I don't have that power because I'm already moving it. My neurons are already firing. My lungs are already going, so on and so forth. In other words, I can't make myself move if I never have been moving ever, to start with. So again, since this is a conclusion, and as long as we understand what it's saying, not like I can't make myself get up out of the chair and walk around, but I can't make myself begin to move if I had never been moving before. As long as we understand the meaning of what's being claimed here, then it just follows from up here. And if I don't like that, we have to understand it's just restating what we said above. So if we accepted all 4 premises so far, this is something we should just accept. And, if you don't want to accept it, that's fine. That's up to you. But you have to find something in the first 4 premises to be like, no, I don't agree with that. So, the second conclusion follows from the first conclusion. There's no additional premises. I'm not sure really who originated this, the argument in these premises, but I did go back and compare this to the actual article from Aquinas, and this is almost spot on. Some of these are out of order, but that's because just for rhetorical sense. But look at premise 6 or conclusion 2. Therefore, each thing in motion is moved by something else. Or another thing, in other words, if something is in motion, it got its original movement put into motion by something else, right? So again, I can't make myself begin to move at the beginning of my existence. My parents had to like make myself move in the very beginning, not like intentionally, not trying to make me move, but they're responsible for the origin of my existence. And so, well, they were moving before, and so on and so on. This goes back into history. It's like a long line of dominoes, right? And he says this sequence of motion cannot extend ad infinitum, infinity into the past. There has to be something right here. Therefore, it's necessary to arrive at a first mover, put in motion by no other, and everyone understands this to be God. Now, let me pull this back up. Sorry about that. Now, so in other words, imagine a line of dominoes, like I just explained. If there are dominoes falling, and this is also helpful in the next argument, the argument from cause and effect, because it's basically, like I said, 1, 2, and 3 are very similar. So there's cause and effect happening in the first way, there's motion happening, but the same idea applies, right? So line of dominoes, if I see dominoes falling right here, which I admitted I did, right? Because that's the first premise. I admitted that I see movement. I admitted I see it happening right now. And it had to start. It was moved by another thing, there's a domino, and before that, and a domino before that, and a domino, and so on and so on. It can't extend on into infinity in the past, because what I mean by extending infinitely into the past is that there was no beginning, no first domino to fall. If there's no first domino to fall, that means that there would be no movement right now. There would be no dominoes right now. The fact that there are dominoes falling right now means it started to fall. If there was never, because I know it's hard to conceive of infinity, but we're talking about infinitely into the past. There is no beginning. So if there's no beginning, there's no first domino. And if there's no first domino to fall ever, then there can't be dominoes falling now. But like we said, if there are dominoes falling now, that means that there had to be some first domino that falls. And that's what he calls the first mover. He calls this the first mover. You can also think about this as, I'll put this in parentheses, first mover or unmoved mover. You'll sometimes hear the idea, he said here, and I'm paraphrasing here, a first mover put in motion by no other, right? Because this would be something that's quite unique. I know atheists don't like this because they see it as special pleading, which is a fallacy. But special pleading is only a fallacy if it's unjustifiable special pleading. In this case, at reason's demand, we have to say, well, this had to have happened necessarily, and it had to have happened by something that wasn't put in motion by anything other. Now, Aquinas thinks this is the clearest argument. I think when you couple it with the second way, it's actually even clearer,